So we're going to just get started. Next slide, please. My name is Alexandra, and I'm co-monitoring today with Lindsay. We're both members of the CSRR Training Committee. Next slide, please. Today, we have been approved by the Site Remediation Professional Licensing Board for 0.5 technical and 1.5 regulatory CEC credits for this training session. Attendance is required to be logged on the entire session and answer both poll questions that will be randomly inserted in the presentation. Next slide, please. Since the board has approved the credits, we will send a list to the board after the webinar, and the LSRPA will email eligible participants a link to the website where they will get their certificate for access instructions, and then certificates will be issued by the LSRPA after you pay the $25 processing fee. This will all come through the LSRPA. Next slide, please. This is just an example of how the poll questions will appear on the screen. So we'll do test your knowledge. Next slide, please. So you should be able to see a poll question. Our question is, why are you here today? A, to earn CECs. B, learn more about timeframes. C, learn more about CSRR. You'll have 1 minute to answer poll questions. Please answer the poll questions. If you have any technical difficulties, please message us in the chat as soon as possible. Next slide. We do have a course evaluation that we appreciate any and all feedback for. I will be putting that link in the chat. So at the end of the training, if everyone could take some time to fill it out, it really just helps us know what it is that you would like to see from our training events. And we appreciate all the feedback. And again, it will be posted in the chat. Next slide, please. Just want to go over some of the forms of communication. We have two communication functions, one being the question function. Please use that question function to ask any questions that you have during the presentation at any time during our training. If the question is not addressed during our question segments, we will be answering them after the presentation in the upcoming weeks. There's also a chat function that we have, and we ask that you use the chat function for any technical issues during the presentation. This chat function is not to make comments on the presentations or ask questions or to have side conversations amongst yourself. Next slide, please. Your job in this training is to participate, ask questions, keep us informed if you have any issues technically. It's very important that you answer the poll questions. You need to answer both poll questions in order to qualify for your credits. And provide feedback. Fill out the Survey Monkey at the end of the training. Next slide, please. And we're going to get started. We have someone joining us from the LSRPA who will be going over their slides. Cassidy, you can turn on your webcam and unmute.
Welcome, everyone. December 6th NJDP Hot Topics course. As was stated, this is approved for 1.5 regulatory credits as well as a half technical credit. Next slide, please. We'd just like to thank our annual sponsors, our diamond partners, our platinum partners, and our academic institutional partner. Thank you very much. Next slide. Thank you very much to all of our gold sponsors. Next slide, please. And our silver partners. We really appreciate it. Next slide. We welcome you to all of our upcoming LSRPA courses and events. As you can see, we have a full slate coming up. We have a course coming up in mid-December, beginning of January, and then mid-February as well. Please go on the LSRPA website to find out more information and to sign up. And then we also have this course scheduled for March 12th. We welcome all. And then, as always, you can find out more information about the LSRPA, what we do, what are the benefits of membership, as well as information about upcoming courses on our website, through our LinkedIn page, on X, and on Facebook. And if you haven't already, please remember to renew your membership for 2024. You should have received an automatic renewal through your email, but if you haven't, feel free to scan the QR code here, and that will take you right to the registration page. And if you aren't a member yet, we'd love to have you. So please click on the link here, or just go directly to the LSRPA website to find out more information. And congratulations to the latest batch of LSRPs. We're excited to see you guys get started and have great careers. Thank you again, everyone. Enjoy the presentation.
Thank you very much. Our first speaker we're going to have is Lynn with a technical review panel.
Good morning, everybody. I am Lynn Mitchell, the Assistant Director of the Remediation Review Element, and the two bureaus that report to me are the Bureau of Inspection and Review and the Bureau of Remedial Action Permitting. Next slide, please. So an email was sent out on Wednesday, November 8th, explaining that we are reestablishing our technical review panel. This is the exact email that was sent out, and in that email is a link to the department's webpage for the technical review panel. Next slide, please. Again, here is the link to the technical review panel at the top of the slide. The website explains that the technical review panel is for technical disagreements between LSRPs and our staff. The goal is to resolve these issues as quickly as possible, and the panel will be comprised of managers and topic experts not previously involved in the case. Next slide, please. What the technical review panel is not is also indicated on the website. It is not appropriate to discuss matters of policy or legal issues. As I said, it is only for technical issues. It is not to resolve technical disagreements between two LSRPs, two PRCRs, or an LSRP and a PRCR. It's only for technical disagreements between an LSRP and our staff. It's not for sites under traditional direct oversight, and it is not a tech consult. A tech consult should be requested prior to the submission of a report or a permit application. Next slide, please. So what is the process? The process, so you make a submission to our programs. If there's some issues, the staff will issue a notice of incomplete. Their supervisor will be copied on that. If you have any concerns or issues with what is submitted to you, you can raise the issue to the supervisor that is indicated on that letter, and then you continue raising the issue up to the bureau chief if that's what you need to do. If you're not satisfied with the response of the bureau chief, then you need to put your request for the technical review panel in writing to the email address listed there, and it would go to the Assistant Commissioner's office. The request should contain a brief statement of what's already provided. It should have a description of timeframes and 3 dates and times that you are available. We will then notify you if your request was approved. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you, Lynn. Sorry. Thank you, Lynn. Our next presenter will be Crystal.
Hello, my name is Crystal Prozik. I am the supervisor for Bureau of Site Management in the construction section. I am also the chair for the Field Sampling Procedures Manual. Next slide. So the committee has been updating the Field Sampling Procedures Manual for the last couple years. Chapter 6, Sampling Collection, was posted in November 2022 for use. And that's what I'm going to be discussing very briefly today. The main training for Chapter 6 as well as Chapters 5 through 13 will be in February 2024. Next slide. So I'm going to discuss the three types of sampling that the department recommends and why we recommend them. The first one is volume average sampling. Volume average sampling is when you remove a minimum of 3 well volumes of water from the well prior to sampling. This sampling method does not require water quality parameters to stabilize. It's volume-based, not water quality parameter-based. Next slide. This sampling method produces the largest zone of influence in the aquifer because of the purging, and it's thought that this sampling method is more likely to detect contamination over the full length of the well screen intake interval rather than low flow, grab, or passive. Next slide. While this sampling method does not require groundwater quality parameters to be stabilized, the department would still like those parameters collected. We feel they're important to have when planning your conceptual site model and for your remedial design work. Next slide. The second type of sampling is low flow sampling. This is when you purge the well at a relatively low flow rate that minimizes sample turbidity. It also it also has minimal drawdown. Next slide. This sampling method has less hydraulic stress to the well intake area. It is considered minimal purge, but it may only influence a small area around the pump intake. Next slide. The third type is passive sampling. This is when you use a device that acquires a sample from a discrete location without inducing active media transport. So it's a no purge sample. This sampling relies on the sampling device being exposed to media in ambient equilibrium during the sampler deployment period. Next slide. So basically this sampling method produces a discrete sample. There's no active media transport, so it's no purge. There's no hydraulic stress to the well intake area. However, the residence time needs to be considered. These samples usually take a week to 2 weeks at a minimum to collect. Next slide. So here you can see the zone of influences for each of the samplers. So you can see that volume average purge has a much greater zone of influence. Next slide. This is the well sampling decision tree. I think it's also a handout for everyone today. It's in the manual in Chapter 6. It's figure 6.10. And this is just used to give you an idea of what the department would recommend for your sampling. Next slide. So while we did add some new text and discussion to Chapter 6 when we were updating it, most of the discussions were not new. They were just expanded on to make more clear. So the policy section, which is what I'm going to discuss next, is not new policies. It's just explained a little bit better. They're policies that we've always had within the department. So this is 69.14, and it's our policy section. So the policy states, when permanent groundwater wells are installed for investigative or contamination delineation purposes, volume average sampling should be used for the first 2 sampling events. And again, this is because we felt this would give a more representative sample from a larger section of the aquifer. Next slide. The next policy states that additionally, when a permanent well is being sampled for site closeout purposes, the well should be sampled using volume average sampling. And this is the same. So the first two and the last two samples should be using volume average purge to get a more representative sample. Next slide. The volume average sampling policy does not apply when groundwater sampling is limited to non-volatile turbidity sensitive parameters. For example, metals, PCBs, total organic carbon. In this situation, sampling methods that may reduce sample turbidity, like low flow or passive, may be used at any time. And if this is something that you are doing during your investigation and your sampling, this should be very clearly noted in the report and the tables why you're using low flow, because it's for one of these parameters. Next slide. And then aside from the first two sampling events for each well, the other groundwater sampling methods may be used. So you can switch methods after the first two as long as your sample produces similar concentrations to the volume average. Next slide. This one has to do with vertical profiling. So it's stated that a minimum of one sample should be collected for every 5 feet of standing water column in the well intake interval. This is discussed in much greater detail in Chapter 6, and we will discuss it in February. Al's going to discuss it in a little bit as it relates to permitting. Next slide. So the department does allow for deviations from all technical guidance documents, including the manual. If you choose to deviate from this guidance, you should document it. So you should tell us, why is your method equally protective? Are there any site-specific circumstances that made you choose that specific method, like low flow with metals? Next slide. So this is an example of what we would like to see at a minimum within the submitted reports. As you can see, a column was added for sample method, and it very clearly states what method was used to collect those samples. And this should also be documented in the report text, but we would like to see it in the tables also. Next slide. And Al's going to discuss the permitting part.
Thank you, Crystal. Yes, Al is our next speaker.
Hi, everyone. I'm Al Shalkanazov, a supervisor in the Bureau of Remedial Action Permitting, and today I'm going to be talking about how the field sampling procedures manual and updates impacts groundwater RAPs. Next slide, please. So we'll start off with initial groundwater RAPs and what BRAP is looking for in a review in terms of field sampling procedures manual topics. So the first thing is we're looking to see that the sampling method used at your site was consistent throughout the most recent 8 rounds of data collected for M&A. If the sampling method isn't consistent through these 8 rounds, it should be confirmed that any switch in sampling method did not influence data trends. So a useful tool to show this could be a comparison study supporting that switching sampling methods doesn't really impact the dissolve phase contamination concentrations at your site. Next slide. Another topic from the field sampling procedures manual that is looked at with initial groundwater RAPs is vertical profiling of monitoring wells. So we're looking to make sure that the pump depth for low flow sampling, the pump depth is consistent between sampling events. So if the pump depth is fluctuating meaningfully, we may wonder if the decrease in contaminant concentration is due to the pump depth fluctuation rather than decreasing trends. Next slide. Okay, so for vertical profiling of monitoring wells, when sampling was completed via low flow or passive sampling techniques, and there's more than 5 feet of saturated screen length, wells should have been vertically profiled as described in the Field Sampling Procedures Manual, section 6.9.5. If monitoring wells were not vertically profiled, then the remedial action report should document and support deviation from the Field Sampling Procedures Manual. Long-term monitoring should target the worst impacted depth interval that you identify through vertical profiling of the well. And when there's more than 5 feet of saturated screen length, vertical profiling of the Sentinel well is recommended every sampling event, as it's not known where the plume will intersect the Sentinel well screen. Next slide. So just to summarize some key points of Field Sampling Procedures Manual topics relating to initial groundwater wraps, to establish a decreasing trend and support M&A, sampling method should remain consistent. Wells sampled with a depth discrete sampling method should be vertically profiled to confirm long-term monitoring represents worst case conditions when there's more than 5 feet of saturated screen length. The sample collection point should remain as consistent as possible vertically and target the worst impacted depth interval, and ongoing vertical profiling of Sentinel wells should be proposed when long-term sampling will be completed with depth discrete sampling methods. Next slide, please. So now we'll get into really there's only one topic that we're looking at with groundwater wrap terminations rather than initial permits. So when sampling wells for site closeout purposes, as Crystal talked about earlier, the department recommends that wells be sampled with the volume average sampling method. So if you haven't completed this at your site, just make sure to document and justify this as a deviation from the Field Sampling Procedures Manual in your RAR. Next slide, please. Okay, so some examples of technical justification that's appropriate when wells are not sampled with the volume average sampling method when you're closing out your site and lifting your CEA. Data comparison studies showing the varying sampling methods produce similar contaminant concentrations is a good one. If contaminants of concern at your site are turbidity sensitive, as discussed earlier, that's the section of guidance doesn't really apply. And then when well yields are too little to utilize volume average sampling techniques, that's another example. Next slide, please.
So we're going to do a poll question now. Again, this is the first real poll question. Next slide, please. An example of appropriate justification for when wells are not sampled with a volume averaging sampling method include A, data from varying methods have similar continued concentrations. B, COCs are turbidity sensitive compounds. C, wells yield too little water to use volume average sampling. D, all of the above. You have a minute to answer. Just want to remind everyone that all the handouts are in the chat. Also, to keep a lookout for upcoming training events posted via listservs. Great. So next slide. Oh, there's the answer, was D. Again, everyone had to answer the question, but you don't need to get it right in order to qualify for your credits.
All right, and just one last thing to note is that currently no wrap withdrawals have been processed for these topics and issues alone. You know, these are things we bring up during our reviews, but we understand that the guidance is new and we've been working with LSRPs, so you don't really have to worry about existing submittals getting us asking for withdrawals for these issues alone. It should be noted that with new submittals, these topics may be reviewed with a higher level of scrutiny. And then just remember to provide technical justification when deviating from the Field Sampling Procedures Manual. Next slide.
Hello, everyone. I'm going to do the question segment. My name is Lindsay Brott. Our first question is, which SVOC compounds are larger molecular weight?
I think Greg can answer that one for us.
Greg?
there isn't a specific list, but it's generally things like PCBs, some of the PAHs, coal tars. I would say generally just compounds that have a low volatility, if you want to think about it that way.
Okay. Our next question is, when does the requirement to collect the last 2 rounds using volume average methods become effective? For example, we have our last round scheduled in December. Should this 1 round be conducted using a different method, or are we required to add 1 more?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really a requirement, it's just guidance. So obviously, like, you have to use your professional judgment to determine if it's appropriate at your site or not. So we would recommend like the last round typically be done with volume average purge. Like if you're doing low flow sampling at your site and you're collecting it and you get a clean round with it, we recommend you go out and collect at least 1 more round with the volume average purge. So I think in your situation, it sounds like we would recommend another round, but if you don't think it's appropriate, just make sure to document it in your RER and justify why it's not appropriate at your site.
Thank you. Next question is, if low flow was used for the 8 rounds prior to filing for our AP, should the last 2 rounds have been collected using the volume average method or all 8 using low flow?
So if you've determined that low flow is the best option for your site and you collect your 8 rounds with that and then you justify why you don't have to go back and do the volume average purge, that would be fine just doing the 8 with low flow. But if there is a reason to think that volume average purge may produce a higher contaminant concentration, we'd recommend at least the last round you go out and collect it with volume average sampling techniques. So, but actually, could you just reread that question one more time? I want to make sure it applies to termination and not initial, because they mentioned the 8 rounds.
Yes. If low flow was used for the 8 rounds prior to filing for our AP, should the last 2 rounds have been collected using volume average method or all 8 using low flow?
Gotcha. All 8 using low flow. We would want to see if you justify that low flow is the appropriate method at your site, and then you're doing your data trend analysis with low flow. We don't really want you to switch back to volume average purge at the end because that could influence your trend. So we would like all 8 rounds to be with the same sampling technique.
Thank you. Our next question is a well with a standard 10-foot screen now required to have 2 samples collected?
If the well screen is completely saturated, then you probably would. If it gets a little sticky when you have, if you have between 5 and 10 feet of saturated screen, I mean, technically there should be 2 samples when there's more than 5 feet of saturated screen. If you have just above 5, you may be able to give us some technical justification to support that 1 sample is appropriate, but generally when there's more than 5 feet of saturated screen, we're going to recommend 2 samples be collected. And then, when there's over 10 feet, it's going to be 3 and so on and so on.
Thank you. Next question is there a specific duration prior to submitting a groundwater RAP that groundwater data must be collected?
Can you read that one more time? I'm sorry.
Yes. Is there a specific duration prior to submitting a groundwater RAP that groundwater data must be collected?
So with the M&A guidance document, we're generally recommending 8 rounds of data be collected for M&A, and then 4 of those be consecutive quarters. So those 4 rounds that are consecutive quarters would be collected over 1 year, and then the other 4 rounds could be less sporadic than that. So it's going to be a minimum of 2 years of data generally, and after any active remediation, that's how much data we're going to want to see to support M&A and a RAP.
Okay. Our next question is, will the NJDEP still accept low permeability, deeper clay layers as rationale for not installing a deeper well for vertical delineation if the appropriate lines of evidence are provided? Or is a deeper sample always required for vertical delineation?
That really is a site-specific question. You know, it matters what the confining layer is. You got to kind of, what we're looking for is like how thick is the confining layer? Is it a true confining layer? So is it like a dense, dry clay? So if you have like a very thick, extremely dry clay layer, that can sometimes be used for vertical delineation, but we may start asking things like, did you map the top of the clay layer to see if there's any low spots where contamination could settle, especially if you have like a DNAPO compound? So, I mean, it really does. You have to like look at the confining layer at your specific site to make that determination.
Okay, thank you. Our
And
next
clarify
question is, when filing for a RAP, how recent does the sampling data need to be collected to submission of the RAP application?
We generally want to see recent data to know what's going on at your site. But you know, it matters again what the contaminant concentrations are at your site. If you have like extremely low levels or something and you haven't sampled in 4 or 5 years, but it's like single digit concentrations, we're probably not going to make a big deal of it. But if you have pretty high levels for M&A and your data is 10 years old, we're definitely going to recommend that you collect something more recent. So my biggest suggestion on that would be if, like, for example, you are proposing biennial sampling every 2 years in your RAP, if you haven't continued to do that biennial sampling while you're waiting for your permit, like it's been 7, 8 years since you last collected, we're probably going to bring it up. We expect if like you think as the LSRP collecting data every 2 years is what is protective, even if you're not in the RAP yet, we would probably recommend you stick with the schedule that you're proposing going forward.
Okay, thank you. I believe that is the end of the questions segment for now.
Next slide, please. Our next presenter is John.
Good morning. I'm John Doyon, Section Chief with the Bureau of Site Management, Construction Section. And today I'm going to be talking to you about the administrative guidance for the green, sustainable, and resilient remediation. Next slide. So this is a summary of what I'm going to go over, talk about the definition, give a little bit about the basis and background, and then I'm going to go into the topics that are discussed in the guidance. Next slide. Okay, definition. Site-specific employment of products, processes, technologies, and procedures that mitigate receptor risk to contaminants while making decisions that balance community goals, economic impacts, and the environmental effects beyond the site boundary. Next slide. Okay, so for the basis and background, I'm going to start off with the 2020 scientific report on climate change that was put out by the department. A couple of key takeaways from that document were that since 1895, the temperature in New Jersey is about 3.5 degrees Fahrenheit warmer. Size and frequency of floods are increasing as precipitation is increasing. And the sea level rise is actually accelerating around between 0.2 and 0.5 inches per year. Anybody that's interested in looking at this document, there is a link at the bottom. Next slide. The next document that came out was the 2021 Climate Change Resilience Strategy. This document presented 127 recommended actions across 6 priority areas. Areas like the building of resilient and healthy communities and coastal resilience planning. Again, the link is at the bottom if anybody's interested in looking at this document. Next slide. And then we also have the Resilient Environments and Landscape, or New Jersey REAL. This is an effort to incorporate climate change considerations into the land use rules. The rules that they're being incorporated into include the coastal zone management rules, freshwater wetland rules, flood hazard area rules, and stormwater management rules. Next slide. One of the rules that has actually been changed or amended at this point is the inland flood protection rules. That became effective in July 17, 2023. Next slide. And getting a little bit more focused into site remediation, looking at some of the climate change considerations that are impacting our sites today and within the last, I guess, 10 years or so. We have pictures of the American cyanamide site in Bound Brook after Hurricane Ida. You can see that it was totally flooded. This wasn't the first time that that happened. It actually happened in 2011 with Hurricane Irene. The picture to the right is reparations of a repair of a berm that was impacted at the site during that period. Next slide. So previously, if you look at the technical guidance in 1.9, the green and sustainable practices, our guidance was basically the department encouraged the use of green and sustainable practices during the remediation of contaminated sites. In September 20, 2023, we issued an expansion on that. It's a 4-page guidance document recommending green, sustainable, and resilient remediation. And there's a link to that guidance if you're interested in reading it. Next slide. So what's covered in the guidance document? The first topic is green remediation. We talk about recommending the use of all reasonably feasible renewable energy sources including solar, wind, biomass, and biogas. We recommend conducting cost analysis, comparing the renewable versus traditional energy, renewable energy versus traditional energy for the remedy, and evaluating the cost of purchasing green power. Next slide. We also are recommending vulnerability assessments be conducted, and then based on those resiliency or those vulnerability assessments, considering resiliency measures for the site. Another example of a site where we had an impact is the Syncon site. The blue building to the bottom left is a treatment facility. And during the Superstorm Sandy, it was flooded. It caused probably the facility to be actually shut down for, I think, over 6 months, and additional costs ranging into, I think, $500,000. Next slide. Another topic that's discussed in the guidance document is extreme heat islands and brownfield development. The guidance encourages redevelopment of urban sites into green space to combat urban heat island effects. Some of the cooling strategies are redeveloping into open spaces, incorporating green infrastructure, and developing tree canopies. This allows for carbon drawdown, improved access to parks, and improved public health in the cities. Next slide. We're also encouraging the general overall incorporation of redevelopment into the site remediation process. This will reduce energy expenditure, carbon emissions, and water use. And for the local community, it lowers the per capita carbon footprint, reduces stormwater runoff and flooding, and improves air quality. Next slide. An example of a redevelopment into a more green space is from Camden City, where the picture to the left is a picture of a dilapidated gas station that was turned into a rain garden park, which is pictured to the right. Next slide. We're also encouraging the use of the cleanest construction equipment available. At a minimum, diesel construction equipment, if you're using diesel, should be retrofitted with emission control technologies. Needs to be properly maintained, and the idling should be minimized for all non-road equipment and generators powered by diesel on the site. All construction equipment that does not have aftermarket emission control devices should at least meet the US EPA Tier 4 clean diesel standards. And if you look to the right, there's a picture of this is actually a hybrid excavator built by Komatsu. And the picture at the bottom is a all-electric skid steer. Next slide. If you're looking to replace any equipment, diesel equipment that you might have, there is a funding assistance that's provided through the Bureau of Mobile Sources. The link to their website is right there. We also wanted to indicate that there are regulatory requirements for idling. So all on-road and non-road construction equipment operating at a site or visiting a site should be or shall be complying with the 3-minute idling rule. And there's a recommendation for using the no idling signs. Picture to the right. Next slide. And that's all from me. Thank you.
Thank you, John. Our next speaker will be Nicole.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Olivier. I'm the supervisor of the Bureau of Case Assignment Initial Notice Permitting Unit. I'm going to talk about the functions of the NJDEP online UST registration services. Next slide, please. So before I jump in about speaking about the service itself, I just want to let you know that more in-depth training videos are available and can be found at one of 2 places. They can be found on the training website and also on the site remediation UST forms library page. These links will bring you directly to those more detailed training videos as well as PDF instructions. Next slide, please. So I'm sure most of you have NJDEP online accounts already, but you may not have yet seen the new UST registration service. To find it, after you log into your account and go to your workspace, you want to click the blue Configure Services button. The next slide, please. You want to scroll down to the undergrad storage tank program and choose UST registration services and UST additional certification service. Next slide, please. Once you are in the UST registration service, there are 3 options under submission type selection: annual renewal and modification of UST facility registration, financial responsibility insurance policy update, and initial UST facility registration. Next slide, please. Annual renewal and modification should be chosen anytime you need to update any information for a site that has already has an existing UST registration. So it doesn't matter if the UST were removed 20 years ago. If there were ever any UST at that site that you're working on, you want to choose annual renewal and modification. Next slide, please. Within the renewal or modification service, the user has the ability to make the changes seen here. If you choose closure, you will then be prompted to answer the question, is the purpose of this registration to immediately close all USTs at this facility? For example, you would say yes to this question if you were doing work at a site and you found some orphan tanks that needed to be registered, but you're going to file the NOI and you're going to close the tanks right away. Using this service, you will be able to register the tank and file the NOI in the same day without the need to contact BCANE and ask for an expedition. Answering yes to the specific question, is the purpose of this registration to immediately close all USTs at this facility, just lets us in registration and billing know that this site is going to be terminated and there's no plans to install new tanks at the site in question. Next slide, please. Initial UST facility registration should be chosen if you need to register a tank or tanks to a site that has never had regulated tanks registered previously. This includes both sites that have an existing SRPPI and those that don't. Next slide, please. If you file an initial UST facility registration using the online service for a site that does not currently have an SRPPI, you can choose the facility I wish to use does not currently exist at the facility selection screen, and the PI will be generated upon completion of the service. Next slide, please. At the submission type details screen, if you need to register an orphan tank, choose registration of an existing US or US not presently registered. At the bottom of this screen, there's also a question that asks the date the property was purchased by the current owner. The answer to this question will allow the service to generate the appropriate fee. Next slide, please. So that leads me to my next point, which is that initial US registration fees can now be paid online. But you can see here that the service did the fee calculation using my example of a purchase date in 2013 with no US previously registered to the site. Before everybody had to, contact us in registration and billing, but now this will do it for you. The fee of $700 can be paid by credit card, e-check, or there is a Bill Me option. If you choose Bill Me, you'll be led to a screen where you can either choose an existing contact from the service that you just entered or enter a new fee and billing contact where the bill will be mailed as a paper invoice. The paper invoice can then be paid online the same way that you pay any other invoice, SRP invoices. Next slide, please. When certifying the US registration service, there are 2 or potentially 3 options: third-party facility owner and potentially a third, which would be the facility operator, if that contact was entered during the service. If you choose to certify as a third party, the owner will receive an email with a link to his or her own certification page. So he or she will need to create their own NJDEP online account in order to certify. The other option is to certify as if you were the tank owner. If you choose that, you'll need to upload an authorization page giving you authorization to certify on behalf of the tank owner. This is not an official form, but needs to be signed by the authorizing party. Next slide, please. I do want to point out that there is a new version of the paper US facility certification questionnaire form. US registration billing is no longer accepting this form seen here, the 2018 version. We're still accepting paper questionnaires at this time, but we're encouraging people to begin to use the online US registration service, as we do plan to eventually require all US registrations to be completed online. And next slide, please. So in summary, US registration is now available online through NJDEP Online. The service can be used to update existing information or to register brand new tanks. This process will allow payment to be made online and NOIs to be filed immediately following the US registration service. Next slide, please.
Thank you, Nicole. We're going to start on the question segment now.
Hello. Our first question is, do they need to be certified by an LSRP?
No, they do not have to be certified by an LSRP.
Okay. Our next question is, for underground storage tanks that were removed before the trigger date to be registered, how do we add those tanks to the CID for phase report submittals?
Sorry.
For example, yes. For USTs that were removed before the trigger date to be registered, how do we add those tanks to the CID for report submittals? For example, a TCE storage tank was removed prior to needing to be registered.
So I think the question is asking if you have a tank that was removed pre-September 3rd, 1986, so pre-US registration requirements. It's technically not a regulated tank since it was removed pre-tank regulation, so that makes it non-regulated. So when you're doing your CID, you want to just call that tank a non-regulated UST, and then it won't make you match it up to the tank registration in the CID service.
Thank you. Next question is, does the certification authorization need to be notarized?
No, it does not.
Okay. Our next question is, when certifying as a third party and form is sent to RP, do you need a form with a wet signature, or can this form be emailed in?
So it actually is uploaded during the service. If you miss it for some reason, people miss them sometimes. You can just email it to us, so it doesn't have to be a wet signature note. You can just email it to the SRP UST registration email. We maintain the same email that we always have. So if you miss uploading the authorization page for whatever reason, you can always email it to us.
Thank you. Next question, for a UST closure, would we be required to submit an authorization to submit online form?
No, those are separate from this process.
Thank you. Those are all the questions that we have for now.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. Next presenter, Rob.
Hi, good morning. I'm Rob Lux. I'm a section chief with the Bureau of Enforcement and Investigations. And I thought I'd do a quick data miner refresher for the new LSRPs, and maybe if you have new staff that do this for you, I just wanted to hit some of the high points. Next slide, Tyrone, please. All right, so data miner. Most of you know this, most of you used it, but it's a tool that links to the department's New Jersey Environmental Management System database. And it allows the public access, it allows LSRPs, it allows your PRCRs to access data. Very helpful, very broad. There's over 80 reports that you can access. And finally, I think this is important, is that it allows the user to look at the same data, the same dates, the same submittals that the department uses to track a case and to determine whether or not a site has missed a time frame or is subject to enforcement. Next slide, please. So I'm focusing on CSRR cases. That's what this is all about. And I just wanted to note that the web address did change in October. So if you could bookmark this address for data miner if you haven't already, or if you just Google, that's fine, but here's the new address. Next slide, please. So why is it important? Not only does it help you track the status of your cases that you have, but it also is a good tool to spot and correct errors before they become a problem for you or your clients. So you can determine if a submittal wasn't added to NGEMS. The dates maybe of the submittals weren't entered accurately. Are the timeframes really missed, or is there something that the department has found an error? So I have on the slide just if you find an error, this is the web address to go to, send an email to this address. And if we could have that put in the chat, that would be great. Next slide, please. So to continue on, data miner will give you the timeframes for your cases, both past and present. So you can prepare for a case so you don't go out of compliance, and you can see what your PRCR has already missed or the site has missed. So the fact that you may have, or the site has missed a past time frame is going to be important if you're going to apply for an extension, and Raphael will be talking about that in the next presentation. From my standpoint as an enforcement person, to me a big deal right now is that there's a huge number of cases that are coming due in May with a mandatory RAR timeframe. And hopefully, if you can access data miner, maybe we can prevent some of these cases from going out of compliance. Next slide, please. All right, so I'm just going to run through this real quickly. So if you go to the data miner website that we've already linked to, my recommendation is start with search by category. Next slide, please. All right, when you get to this is the next screen you'll see. Report category, you'll hit the down arrow and go to site remediation. Yes, I know, it's site remediation, it's not CSRR. We'll get to it. Next slide, please. All right, for the purposes of identifying past and future timeframes, I'm recommending to use the case tracking tool by LSRP. Like I said, there's 80 plus reports in here. I think this one makes the most sense for an LSRP with multiple cases. There are other options if you're just looking up one case, but I think this is probably your best bet. So this report, you're going to be able to verify that all the contact information is correct for your cases, that the dates for your submittals for your site, and you can identify, again, any missed or upcoming timeframes. Next slide, please. All right, so this is a screen you're going to see after you click on the site remediation. And this is just where you're going to click for the case tracking tool. Next slide, please. You're going to put in your license number, and this will bring up all your cases. Next slide, please. And this is an example of a particular case that will give you, and it's just showing you what you can get. Now, this is showing initial receptor evaluation, RI and RAR. I think what you'll see is if you have an ISRA case, you're going to see PASI. If you're looking at an US case where there's been a discharge, you might see an SI. So this is just a general spill-at case. You'll see something different perhaps based on what case requirements are there. Next slide, please. So this is the rest of the page that you'll see. And again, it lists out due dates and received and completed dates. And that's it. Next slide, please. So after you've looked at your timeframes, what other reports can I recommend that I think are particularly important? And I think one of them is this case inventory documents and associated areas of concern. This to me is important because it allows you to verify all the AOCs and US that are associated with a particular LSR activity. Just most of you know this, but if a PI number can have multiple LSR activities with multiple different AOCs. So it's going to be important that you check to make sure that you've identified and remediated and addressed all the particular AOCs at your site. Another one that I think is important is the financial obligations summary report. It shows you all the bills and the status of any kind of RFS. That's important to me because sometimes at the end of a case, there are fees that need to be paid, there's RFS that needs to be established, and if you submit something and that information is not, or if those bills have not been paid, it can delay the closure of your case. Next slide, please. And then this is just an example output. One of the things that I like and I use is the active links under attachments and downloading link. I think that's, to me, is very useful. It may be useful for you as well. But again, it lists the other material that's available, all the other AOCs. Next slide, please. And then this is just an example of the output you'll get with the financial obligations report. Again, it will tell you if you're in arrears for the fees, and it's giving you the status of your RFS. This is going to be a big deal at the end of your case. Next slide, please. All right, other reports. I like the institutional controls and special conditions. We are getting more involved in the BRAP cases. So this report is going to give you access to a variety of things, cases that need remedial action permits, bi-certs that are overdue, the classification areas, and the deed notices. And just note that the CEA and the deed notice reports, you can do it by municipality, county, or all. All right, next slide, please. So the last one, I think, is the Actor Remediation Funding Source Report. Just a good report, again, to make sure that you have your RFS is complete and accurate. And then a report that I don't know that many people run often, but again, to prevent surprises in a case, I think this is a good one. It includes all the incidents called in, It includes all the ISRA triggers if they're there, historic numbers, US closure permit information, US registration numbers. Again, I just don't want people to be surprised that there are other issues at your site that maybe aren't showing up on a general page. All right, next slide, please. And that's it.
Thank you. Thank
Sure.
you. Raphael will now begin his presentation with timeframe.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Rafael Rivera, Section Chief with the Bureau of Case Assignment and Initial Notice. I will be highlighting some tools available on SRP's website that can assist you with timeframes, briefly going over the Executive Order 103, and a quick overview of the remedial timeframe notification form. Next slide, please. So why do we have timeframes? The Site Remediation Reform Act required the department to establish mandatory timeframes for key phases of remediation, such as a PASI, RI, RA. So to keep RPs on track, the department also established regulatory timeframes to avoid missing mandatory timeframes, which results in direct oversight. Next slide, please. A summary of the regulatory and mandatory timeframes can be found on SRP's website under Quick References Guide. The summary identifies the timeframes associated with ISRA, US, and Spill Act discharge cases. Next slide. The SRP website also has a summary of Executive Order 103 regulatory compliance issues link, which can assist you in determining if adjustments have to be made to your existing timeframes. The majority of EO extensions have been applied. However, there's still a small universe of cases that have not been updated. We have been working on that over the last year or so, trying to identify that universe and updating them. So if you come across any, please email the SRWM_NGEMS email that Rob went over, and we'll try to update those dates. Next slide. So this is a quick overview of the EO link, provides information pertaining to the EO 103 impacts on ACOs, site investigations for us, soil only cases, and a summary of EO extension issues. The EO 103 extension applied to cases with timeframes between March 9th, 2020 and January 11th, 2022, outlining the notices and listservs referring to emissions. So basically, a one-year extension was applied for all statutory cases if an LSRP was retained. For non-statutory cases, 455 days was applied to the time frame if it fell within that window, if they had a LSRP retained, and all subsequent tasks were also updated. If you did not meet the February 1st, 2021 notice, 270 days was applied to your case if your time frame fell between March 9th, 2020 and January 31st, 2021. But again, that only applied to that one single task. The subsequent tasks were not updated for that universe. Next slide. So that's a quick overview of the resources available to assist you in determining the timeframes associated with your case. If adjustments have to be made for one of the following reasons, an extension, lengthening, or media, the remedial timeframe notification form must be submitted. The form can be found on the SRP forms page. Only check off the boxes that apply and complete the correspondence section. One form for each LSR activity. Also make sure you check data miner as outlined by Rob in the previous presentation to ensure the dates are correct before submitting the remedial timeframe notification form. If the dates are incorrect, please contact BK before submitting the form at srwm_ngems@dep.nj.gov, as noted by Rob also. Next slide. So extension request. So if you're applying for an extension, complete section C of the form. Regulatory timeframes can be extended to the mandatory timeframe. Regulatory timeframe extensions are deemed approved unless you get a denial letter. Mandatory timeframe extensions require written approval from the department. Next slide. All regulatory extension requests must be submitted at least 30 days prior to the regulatory timeframe, but no sooner than 6 months. The justification must specify why the timeframe would not be met and steps taken to minimize the delay. As noted earlier, the regulatory timeframe can be extended to the mandatory timeframe. For example, the SI regulatory for a NUS case or ISR case can be extended 1 year to the mandatory. If additional time is required, then a new extension request to the mandatory timeframe must be submitted. Next slide. Mandatory timeframe extension requests must be submitted at least 60 days prior to the mandatory timeframe, but no sooner than 6 months. Extension requests in certain circumstances are deemed approved, such as permits and funding. However, the permit application or funding application must be complete. The extension shall be equal to the actual duration of the delay. If you're submitting an extension request because you're waiting for a permit prior to issuing the REO, please request 6 months. The approval letter will reference that it's conditional approved and will be equal to the amount of time it takes the department to issue the permitting or the permit funding, if it's a funding issue, plus the 30 days. However, if the permit grant application is deemed incomplete, it will result in revocation of the conditional extension. All MTF extension requests will receive either an approval or denial letter. Next slide. So as Rob mentioned, the extension window for the May 2024 deadline is now open. It opened November 6, 2023 to March 7, 2024. This covers the universe of cases with a date remediation required to be initiated prior to May 8, 1999. If this is the first mandatory extension request, please include a concise list, bullet points of actions, events completed, and reasons why additional time is required. If this is the second mandatory time frame extension request, please provide bullet points as noted above, but focus on the actions between 2022 and present. The assumption is that if this is your second time around, you came in for the initial mandatory extension in 22, so this is your second request. Make sure you focus on that 2-year period, what you did, because the assumption is if it was approved, you gave us enough information already, so we have that in our files. So what we do is look at the previous extension request and see what the new extension request is and see what was done between that 2-year period. Include a proposed schedule of remaining remedial actions and anticipated submittal of RAR report and RAP application if applicable. If property access is the justification, please refer to subchapter 8 and include a copy of the complaint filed in Superior Court to gain access pursuant to 726C 3.5D, which says you should include a copy of the complaint. Next slide. So this is just a quick summary of the most common reasons extension requests are denied. One is the regulatory timeframe must be submitted at least 30 days prior. Previously missed timeframes, inadequate justifications, and the mandatory timeframe must be submitted 60 days also prior to the deadline. So those are the most common denials. And next slide. And I think there's a poll question.
There is, yes. We're going to do a test your knowledge. This is the second poll question. Next slide, please. An extension request for a mandatory timeframe can be submitted 30 days prior to the timeframe due date. A for true, B for false. Just a reminder that you do have to answer this question in order to qualify for the credits at the end of the training. If you have any problem answering the poll questions, please be sure to let us know in the chat. Also in the chat, you'll see all our handouts and copies of the links that we've been referring to in the presentation. Okay, the answer is, next slide, false, B. Thank you.
All right, so Moving on to the lengthening options located in Section C of the remedial timeframe notification form. Lengthening only applies to the remedial investigation phase for non-statutory cases if the conditions listed under number 5 exist at the site. Section E2 corresponds to how many boxes are checked off under 5. Lengthening will change the RA timeframe, so please make sure you exhaust all your lengthening options before submitting an extension request. And the reason I point this out, Section E2, is because you'll be amazed, people put in there 3-4 years and they only have one box checked off. So please, Section 2 should be responding to how many boxes you checked off under number 5. And obviously, if it's an ISR case, it's only, you get 3 additional years because they have to do, in most cases, an entire site anyway. So check box number 4 would not apply. Next slide. Lastly, complete Section D of the remedial timeframe notification form for media. Media includes groundwater, sediment, and surface water. All cases are initially set up for soils. A remedial timeframe notification form must be submitted to update for media. Our submission to update for media will not update the timeframes. And you can see that we sent out a listserv in March of 2023, which was sent as a reminder. I think the initial listserv went out, if I remember correctly, it might have been in 2014. So we felt that we should send a reminder because that happens all the time. We get calls, emails regarding why is my case not showing up the additional 2 years. So that's just a public announcement. So next slide. So that's a quick overview of some of the tools available and some key points about completing the remedial timeframe notification form. This slide gives you some contact information. Should you have any questions. That concludes my presentation. Thank you. And if you have any questions, here.
Our first question for you, Raphael, is, does the failure to meet timeframe form need to be submitted if an MTF extension is approved?
No, if it's approved, no. It's all a timing issue, to be honest with you. I know some LSRPs, since they may submit their extension request and they don't know if it's going to get approved, they still submit that form just to make sure it was submitted on time. Because the last thing they want to do is not submit it and then it gets denied and then it's late. So I know that it's been an issue, but we currently right now we're able to approve the extensions pretty quickly, so you should get your answer. So yes, if you get the approval letter, you don't have to submit that form. But that's just an FYI. In case, I know last year, the week before the 60 days, we got over 500 extension requests. And I know that was one of the issues that came up because LSRPs weren't sure if they were going to get the approval or not. So I think at that time we said, well, we just can't get to all these within a week. So the best thing to do is submit your form just in case.
Okay. The next question is, if an approved regulatory timeframe extension request also results in an extension of the downstream mandatory timeframe, does that count as a mandatory timeframe extension request?
I'm not sure if I understood the question correctly, but I'm going to give it a shot. So when you apply for an extension and you're extending your regulatory to your mandatory, typically what we do is, those are deemed, assuming it was received on time, they're in compliance, and then there's a justification that gets approved, your regulatory moves to your mandatory. That would be your set date. Then, 2 years later, you still are not done and you have to request an extension to your mandatory. It does not extend your mandatory. You can only extend your regulatory to your mandatory, and then you would have to come in for an additional extension to extend your mandatory beyond that. Now, if you come in on the extension form and try to extend both at the same time, we would typically send you an email and basically tell you to revise the form or inform you that only the regulatory was extended to the mandatory and you will have to apply for an additional extension.
Okay.
Hopefully that answered the question. If not, we can get back to you on when we respond to the questions we don't respond during this session.
Okay, thank you. The next question is, what does duration of delay refer to in case of awaiting NJDEP's review of GWRAP application? Is it from the date of the submittal to current date?
Correct. What we do is once we receive the application, that would be your start date. And then once the permit is issued, so what we do is we calculate that time and add it to your time frame. So it's based on when we receive the application. Right, the permit application.
The next question is, if the RP receives an extension to the mandatory time frame to complete RA while the RAP application is under review, is there an opportunity for the RP to respond to the application deficiencies prior to being placed in direct oversight?
Correct. We always give, the only time we, assuming you got an extension request, if it's conditional, we do not deny or do anything with the time until either one, the application is withdrawn, or two, the application is deemed incomplete. So you can respond to the deficiency. It does not impact your extension. But once the application is withdrawn or deemed incomplete, that's when you would go under direct oversight.
Okay. Next question is it possible to request complexity timeframe extensions which were not requested prior to RI if conditions change and these complexity factors are present afterwards?
Well, I think that's hard to answer because sometimes, the assumption is that that question would be, is the RI really complete then? What we could do is, I'm not sure who asked the question, but if you can email me or, say specific conditions. And the other issue is, your time frame had already passed because the lengthening requests are required to be submitted 30 days prior. So this is going to be after the fact. So just based on that, we would typically deny those. But again, if it's a site-specific issue, we can definitely look at it and see if there's something we could do and work out.
Thank you. The next question, will a previously missed timeframe always lead to a denial of a timeframe extension request?
I would not say always, but this is where we defer to enforcement. But yes, typically what we do is, we check the timeframes. If there's any missed timeframes, we would deny it, but there's always some discretion that enforcement may use and may reach back out to us. But usually we would send out a letter. So I don't know if I would use the term always. I think in my presentation I put may be denied.
Okay. The next question, do the complexity factors extend the current deadline and all subsequent deadlines by 1 year for max? Can you then request extensions after you've lengthened the timeframes via the complexity factors?
Right. Typically what happens is, like I mentioned in my presentation, you have your timeframe set, and then if there's lengthening options, that's going to move your RI and RA dates. Once that's established, and let's say you exhausted all your lengthening options, once those dates are set, they're set, and then you can go through the normal extension process if you need additional time for those phases.
Next question is, if you submit an extension request for a mandatory time frame and you have not heard back from the NJDEP and you are approaching the mandatory deadline, do you recommend submitting failure to meet a mandatory deadline form?
Yes, I would definitely recommend. Again, I think I had mentioned that a little earlier. I know we came across this in 2022. And again, it doesn't hurt to submit it. I think that's something I believe the board may look at to see if those forms were submitted. And I believe from what I recall back in 2022, they also recommended to submit it.
Thank you. Next question. Does the RAP application need to be submitted at least 60 days prior to MTF in order to get the permit review extension approved?
Well, in the perfect world, I mean, what we prefer is to have the RER submitted, the RAP application, and the extension, and then your justification would be, um, it would be as simple as I'm waiting for my permit. That was the direction. But if for some reason, I know we're coming across this in some cases where, uh, they're not ready to submit their RER or their permit application, I would just request a normal extension request and we would just go through the process. Because what we were the whole concept of the conditional approvals was that we didn't want to have you have to come in every 2 years to ask for an extension request. So if we had the application, the RER, the extension request, and the only reason you couldn't issue the REO was because of the permit application, if we had all those three things in place, we would issue the conditional. This way it kind of gives you, if it takes BRAP 3 years, you didn't have to worry about it. You didn't have to come back in again. But we have gone some requests where they justifications for the permit, but they still haven't submitted the RER or permit application, but they anticipate submitting it before the deadline. So I would just, in those scenarios, I would just treat it like a regular extension. You can summarize what you plan to do, and then we'll just update the dates based on that.
Thank you. Next question. If submitting an extension request for a mandatory time frame because an RA permit is being reviewed, how long of an extension should we request?
I think I mentioned that in the in our, again, there's two scenarios. One, if you submit your application, your RAR, your RAP application, your extension request all at the same time, and we document that in our system, you can request 6 months because we just don't know how long it's going to take. So, I know we have to put a date in there. So we had told everyone put 6 months because it's not going to matter. Our letter is going to say it's going to equal to the amount of time it takes us to process the permit. Now, if you had the other scenario where you're not submitting your RAR or the RAP application prior to the 60 days, then I believe their turnaround time is 2 to 3 years right now, I believe. If you want to put that, that's fine, because we're going to read your justification. And in there, I would just put, I anticipate submitting the RER, the permit application, before the deadline. And it's taken BRAP about 2 to 3 years so I'm going to request 2 or 3 years for the RAP application. So we'll note that in our system. So that kind of covers the two scenarios.
Thank you. I have a question. I would like to go back to the data miner. Our question is there a data miner report available that identifies the LSRP retained for a RAP?
Hold on, sorry.
Was that Rob?
No,
Yes.
it's not actually Rob. I've been looking for the answer. I know I just have to find my screen. I went and phoned a friend because this was not covered by Rob's presentation, but from what I understand, the LSRP comprehensive report indicates which RAPs are retained by the LSRP. So not exactly, I think, what the question was, but that's the best answer we have of where you can get that information. So if that's not the question that you wanted, please ask another one, and I'll try to get that answer for you as well.
I'd like to go back to a question directed at the sampling procedures. The question is, would volume average purging not obliterate your vertical profile?
Greg, are you still here?
Yeah, I was just trying to get my microphone clicked back on. Maybe in a very, very small time frame, because obviously if you're stressing the well out and you're pumping a lot of water, you are kind of moving things around. But we always keep in mind that in New Jersey, the groundwater itself is owned by the state, so we kind of regulate the aquifer, not just the borehole that is represented by the well. So I think it's important for people to understand that, we regulate more than just the water in the borehole. We're regulating the aquifer quality. So that's one of the reasons why we kind of want to stress that we would like at least some samples, to be collected by volume averaged, because it's not unusual for people when they take a volume average sample to wind up with a groundwater sample that has more contamination than another method. Is it representative of that exact borehole, that exact spot? Maybe not, but it shows that there's contamination in the aquifer around the well that the well itself, under a passive method, might not necessarily detect.
Okay. The next question for field sampling is, should the vertical profile sampling be conducted using low flow method?
I think they have an option to try different methods and see what works. Passive, like it said, it involves no purging. The samples under a passive method, like a PDB bag, are probably more likely to be a little more distinct and separate because they're only being affected by natural flow through the well. Low flow does purge a little bit of water. You, depending on the well recharge capability, you could get some mixing during that purging, and so it's possible that the samples from low flow vertical profiling might be a little similar in their results than passive, but they have the option to try either method.
Okay, thank you. Next question, again for field sampling. How is vertical delineation sampling accomplished using volumetric purging?
I really don't think most people would try to do vertical profiling, use the volume average method, and that's because the volume average method, by its definition, we're trying to stress the entire well take interval, essentially the saturated screen interval, or the entire section of a bedrock borehole that has water that's open to the surrounding aquifer. And so, because we really want to try to get water intake throughout that whole well take interval, it doesn't really work very well in terms of trying to profile using a volume averaged method. So I think to really answer the question that they're asking is that we would prefer, and I think it would work out better, to try to use a method other than volume average sampling to do the vertical profiling.
Thank you. Next question. Staying on sampling, are PFOS, etc., considered compounds subject to turbidity that would allow use of low flow sampling technique?
I know that the PFAS is kind of an ongoing expanding field, and there's a lot of PFAS out there, and my understanding, I know a little bit about them, I don't claim to be an expert, is that some of them can stick to sediments, some of them really don't want to stick to sediments, and I think the jury's out on that a little bit right now in terms of how turbidity could affect a PFAS groundwater sampling result. I would say if they have PFAS issues, they might want to try different sampling methods and just compare what sample results they get, and they might be able to answer their own question based on what they find at this time.
Okay. The next question, sampling again. What is the optimal flow rate for volume average purge, and what should the water level return to prior to sampling?
The optimum flow rate is really going to be based on the well capacity, the well yield. We would like people to try to purge at a rate that's a little higher than what the well can recharge, because if you're pumping less water out of the well than the well can recharge, and generally when that happens, you're seeing either no or minimal drawdown. It's possible that we're only seeing a select section of the well intake interval supply the water that you're getting, that you're purging. So you're not really seeing the whole well take interval. So if the contamination is toward the bottom of the well, it's possible that the upper part of the well intake interval is actually what's recharging the bulk of the well at the rate that you're purging. So again, you're kind of only like seeing a little bit of the aquifer around the well in terms of what that sample would represent. And that's why it's really important moving forward, and we want to stress going forward that people know the well recharge capability of the well that they're sampling as accurately as possible, so that they can bring appropriate sampling equipment to purge the well, and they know what rate they want to purge the well to achieve the level of stress and drawdown appropriate for the sampling.
Okay. The next question, If vertical profiling is done by low flow, but you stated first 2 rounds of sampling must be done by volumetric purge, would you want to vertical profile right off the bat?
It's a question that's never been brought up. We would like people to volume average first just to collect that data, because in theory, a volume averaged sampling method samples a larger part of the aquifer around the well. In theory, it should sample a larger section of the well intake interval itself. And during the first sampling of a well is kind of when people are trying to decide, do I have an exceedance? Is this well clean? And that can have a long range implication moving forward about where the edge of your plume is. Do I need to continue this sample? Is it contaminated or is it not? And our feeling is that a volume average sampling method has a higher probability of detecting contamination farther away from the well, and as such, you might have a higher probability of detecting a groundwater exceedance in that area. So the conclusion is we probably would want you to conduct volume average sampling just to obtain that data early in your understanding of the well water quality. And that's why it says the first 2 rounds.
Thank you. The next question, if NJDEP issued a CEA previously that excluded VOCs because of prior low flow compliant samples, do those wells need to be resampled using volume average flow?
I know this is that same question that they asked before, and I'm not sure what they mean by compliance. Are they stating that they didn't find VOCs using the previous method? I'm opening it to anyone else. Is that how they're interpreting it?
I think
They wrote in again, they wrote, meaning if a CEA was issued during RI and did not include VOCs because of compliant results, does the CEA need to be reevaluated via volume average samples?
Go ahead, Alex.
I was just going to say, I mean, if there's some reason to think that if you were to go back and sample it with volume average sampling, there would be exceedances there, I think we would recommend that you go back and do that. But if you, as the LSRP, are confident that you selected the sampling method that is the most protective for the site, and you determined that was low flow, and then VOCs weren't present in that well, I think it would be fine to not go back to that well. I think it's just something that would need to be discussed in the report.
So they clarified that, meaning VOCs were present and then 2 rounds were clean prior to establishing the CEA.
I mean, I don't think we're going to go back like 5 or 6 years and start saying like, well, that well, you didn't do volume average purge to close it out. Like, this is all something that is going to be emphasized going forward. So I guess like in the future, if you have a well that was closed, like that gets closed out without volume average purge, like it could be an issue. But if this seems like a question that's talking about data that was previously collected, and I don't think we're emphasizing this as much on older data as we are like with new sampling of wells going forward.
Okay, I'll move on to the next question. Next question, does Greg recommend using 5 feet well screens to avoid sampling complications?
My understanding from reading some papers is that the smaller your well screen, the more accurate your sample is going to represent that particular section that you're screening the formation. I think that's just kind of basic mechanics. And this issue does get a little complicated because if we put 5-foot well screens and people are trying to assess the vertical limitations of their plume or the extent of their plume, you wind up putting a lot more wells in. So you may wind up with one particular location having 4 or 5 wells. Under the state regulations for well permitting, they're allowed to put 25 feet of well screen. But we do have to be cognizant of the fact that the longer your screen, the higher probability that you can get vertical movement of water within the well screen, which will result in kind of a homogenation of the water quality within the well screen. So it's kind of this walking this tightrope of the cost of putting in clusters of wells versus putting in one well with a longer screen, and then assessing, do I have horizontal do I have horizontal distinction of water quality within the well? You will see that with smaller well screens, but if you have water coming in one part of a 25-foot well screen and going out the bottom, you have vertical flow within the well. That water quality is going to be somewhat homogenized, and it's going to look like your plume is consistent throughout that well depth. So I guess the general answer to the question is the smaller the well screen, the better, because the more discrete the sample, but we do understand that not everybody can afford to put 5 or 6 wells at each location.
Thank you. Next question. If hydro punch sampling was done before the well was installed, would this qualify as vertical profiling?
I would think we could certainly entertain that data, and they would want to, provide as much detail as possible on the hydro punch in terms of if they, certainly the depth interval that the samples were taken, and we certainly use them to target well construction. That's very, very common. It would probably depend on the spacing of the hydro punch in terms of the depth between the samples.
Those are all the questions we have for now.
I did have one more thing that I wanted to add. As I said, my FONA friends are working feverishly behind the scenes trying to get the answers to the question regarding what data mine reports we have. There is another report called Alternate IDs for Selected PIs, and that also shows the LSRP retained to the RAP. So if that helps you, I hope it did. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn, and thank you all to all presenters. Just a couple of reminders. Questions not answered today will be answered via email in the coming weeks. Please fill out our course evaluation. You'll see the link in the chat. Look out for future emails. Look out for emails from the LSRPA regarding your CEC credits, because they will be the ones to help you receive them. And all slides and presentation will be posted on our training page within the coming weeks, including our handouts. Thank you again.